Hello, everyone, and welcome back for the final time for Fallsmon. This is the fifth session of the book of Genesis through the lens of ancient biblical interpretation. For these past 5 weeks, we've had the pleasure of learning with Dr. Chanan Gafni. In this class, we will be looking at the rich and diverse world of ancient Jewish biblical exegesis, each session focusing on a different type of source, highlighting its unique contribution to the understanding of the weekly Parashah. Sources will be shared on screen as part of the PowerPoint. And with that, there's a lot of material I know planned for today, so I'm going to hand over the mic to Dr. Gafni.
Okay, thank you so much. And as you just mentioned, this is really the last of the last session of our series. We are far from covering everything that we could have theoretically covered, but at least we did a nice journey in the last 5 sessions. And what we're going to do today, we're going to explore a different type of source that you might be familiar with, but nevertheless, I think there's some more to say about. And this is the theme of our class today will be devoted to the contribution of rabbinic literature, and more specifically, Midrash, the Midrash, to the understanding of stories in Sefer Bereshit, and also more in general. So our class here, you see so far what we have done. The first session was dedicated to intertextual or inner biblical interpretations. We moved on speaking about the Apocrypha, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Last week, we devoted our attention to the Piyut as a form of a source, or as a form of commentary to the Torah. And today, we will devote our attention to rabbinic literature. How will our class be structured today? So as I said, we have a lot to cover today. The first part of the class will be a very, very brief survey on Midrash. What is Midrash? And again, we don't have the luxury of getting into all the details. We'll just say a few important words that will be essential or crucial for the remaining part of our session. And that will be a test case from the coming Parashah in Sefer Bereshit in Genesis, from Parashat Toldot. And the theme we will address is, why did Isaac's eye grow dim? Before Isaac blesses his sons, or attempts to bless Esau, ends up blessing Jacob, so the Torah specifies that his eyes grew dim. And the theme we will try to address today is, why did that happen? And obviously our goal is to understand that from the perspective, or from the way it's expressed or understood in rabbinic literature, in Midrash. So we're starting the first part of our class, the survey. What is Midrash? So we'll go step by step. Again, just crucial information that will be necessary for our discussion. So I'm starting with the larger picture, rabbinic literature. The term rabbinic literature, as you see here, includes a wide or extensive body of work produced by rabbis in Eretz Israel, in Bavel, in the land of Israel and Babylon, during the first centuries CE, maybe roughly speaking from the first till the 5th, 6th century CE, in different contexts. In Eretz Israel, it's under Roman or Byzantine influence, whereas in Babylon, it's under Persian culture, or in the Persian environment. The corpus initially was transmitted orally, and that's why people refer to rabbinic literature often as Torah Sheba'al Peh, or the oral Torah. Only later it was committed to writing, and we're not getting into the precise timing when this change took place. So rabbinic literature also sometimes is known as the oral law, Torah Sheba'al Peh. And finally, the one more thing that is important to mention, the interpretation of the Torah stood at the center of rabbinic literary enterprise across all its compositions. So this is the main theme, this is the main goal. I'm not saying this is the only thing the rabbis are doing, but certainly this is the main task that stood in front of them. And this is true whether you're speaking about Midrashim, Mishnah, Tosefta, the Babylonian Talmud, or the Palestinian Talmud. The interpretation of the Torah is certainly a very important part of this story. Now we're going to move more precisely, and we're going to talk about two terms that will be crucial for our discussion: Drash and Midrash. So what is Drash and what is Midrash? So we'll start with the Drash. In contrast to the Pshat, I'm reading which represents the original meaning of the biblical text. When people interpret a text and try to decipher the author's intention or the original meaning, we refer to it as an attempt to understand the pshat of the text. In contrast, the term drash expresses the attempt to interpret the text in a rather more creative way. And I want to offer, this is not the only definition, but I think it captures a lot of the idea of drash. It's a way that is meant to preserve its relevance, or the way we can apply the text, the ancient text, the Bible, the Torah, in later times and also in changing circumstances. Midrash describes collections of these exegetical comments of the sages, of the Tanaim and the Amoraim. So each Midrash is the title we would use for a collection or for a composition that includes many of these local ideas of the rabbis. There are two types of Midrashim. Midrash Halacha, an earlier form of Midrash, focuses on the legal dimensions of the Torah and on its practical applications. So it's also trying to bring the text to the present. It's not just looking for the original meaning of the text, but in a sense, it's also trying to bring the text to the present to see how we can apply it, how can we make it, how can we fulfill those laws in our current conditions. Midrash Agadah focuses on the narrative components of the Torah and on its ways on the ways that its content could be made meaningful and inspiring for later generations. So I think that there is something in common both in Midrash Halacha, the legal Midrash, the legal interpretations, and the Agadic interpretations, because they're both, in a sense, trying to see how we can make the text relevant, meaningful in later times or in changing environments or in changing circumstances. Midrash Agadah. Our goal in today's class will be to study passages from Midrash Agadah. We're not going to focus on the legal Midrashim because we're dealing with Sefer Bereshit. In the book of Genesis, we mainly have stories, so it's much more natural to discuss Midrash Agadah. As a matter of fact, there is no Midrash Halacha. There is no legal Midrash to Sefer Bereshit. Our goal is to study Midrash Agadah on Sefer Bereshit, and therefore I want to say a few words. So you see, we're focusing rabbinic literature, Midrashim, and now we're speaking more specifically about Midrash Agadah. The timing of Midrash Agadah, the Agadic Midrashim, belong in terms of the content, meaning the people who speak in the Midrashim, the participants in the discussion, are mainly Amoraim, 3rd to 5th centuries, roughly, although the editing process might have taken place slightly later. Most of the Midrashim probably were edited after the time of the Amoraim who are taking part in the discussion. Place Midrashei Agadah, the Agadic Midrashim, were edited in Eretz Israel. The Amoraim, not just that the editing process was in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel, but also the people who take part in the discussion. Again, this is a very general description, is more people from the land of Israel. Amoraim from the land of Israel are more dominant in Midrashei Agadah, in the Agadic Midrashim. This is going to be an important aspect that will accompany us throughout today's discussion. Text and message. When people study the Midrashim, the interpretations of the rabbis to various verses in the Torah, people are often focusing on one or tend to focus on one aspect, and they do not take into account this dual components, or these two components that are essential in the understanding of the Midrash, the text and the message. When studying the Midrashim of the sages, of the Tanaim, of the Amoraim, one must consider two factors: the conceptual message and its biblical basis. In other words, when we study Midrashim, we have to take into account not just the ideas that the rabbis are trying to teach us, but also keep in mind that these ideas are also rooted in the text itself. It is not enough, the way that sometimes scholars do, to analyze the ideas of the sages present in the Midrash, to focus solely on them, or alternatively, it is not sufficient to focus solely on the biblical verse on which the ideas are based. If you want to understand the rabbis and what they're doing, you have to keep in mind this tension, or not necessarily a tension, but at least combination of these two factors. On the one hand, try to ask yourself, what is the idea the rabbis are trying to teach us? And at the same time, don't just remain in the theological, philosophical realm, but also try to see where is it rooted in the text itself, because the rabbis are thinking about both of these worlds simultaneously. The rabbis knew the Bible very, very well. Rabbinic midrashim are often based on a broad view of scripture, on extensive familiarity, not only with the local verse that is being addressed. So if you're studying the book of Genesis and the rabbis are reflecting on a particular verse, they're not only thinking about that particular verse. Very often they would allude or hint to a distant verse, or might allude to a different story in the Bible, and it's always important, I would even say crucial, to have the Bible near you and open the verses that they're referring to. Sometimes they're not quoted fully, and even if they're quoted fully, maybe the context of the story is important to understand. Especially if you're interested in the biblical origin, in the textual origin of their ideas, it's important to keep this fact in mind. It's not just a local interpretation, it's a very general, it takes into account a very general view of the Bible as a whole. One last thing, and then we're starting our particular example, Pshat and Drash. We already hinted at this idea before, or to this distinction before, but I want to say a few more words about it, and then we can start our way. In the Midrash, the sages offer creative readings of scripture, of the scriptures, of the verses that they're dealing with. It is worthwhile always, when you read a Midrash, to ask, what is the relationship between the pshat, the plain meaning of the text, and the way it's interpreted? Don't immediately accept or consider the rabbi's interpretation through the drash, but first keep in mind that there's a pshat in the background, and try to see the differences between the plain sense, the pshat, and the midrash. That is a crucial step in appreciating what the rabbis are doing. How do the rabbis alter the meaning of the text in their midrash? Now, I think that this is not part of the presentation, but I still want to mention that people sometimes tend to feel or criticize or mock the rabbis for not managing to accept or understand the text according to its plain meaning. And I think it's a misunderstanding of this whole project. I'd like to compare it to a person who's walking in an art museum and he's seeing all these amazing paintings on the wall, and he's saying it doesn't look like the real thing. It's not an art museum is not about photography. It's a creative, artistic way of viewing the reality. And this is also what the rabbis are doing. When they're interpreting the text through their midrashic lens, they're not trying to understand the text according to its original meaning. They're trying to see how they can read it in a creative manner, how they can make it more meaningful, how they're trying to explore or to express what they feel the text could be saying to them. So with that in mind, with all these pieces of introduction, what we will do today, we will try to see how the rabbis read the text or analyze the text in the Midrash, in a particular passage in Sefer Bereshit, in the book of Genesis. And as I mentioned before, the story we're going to analyze, the text in the Midrash that we will get into, is involving the story of Isaac's old age when his eyes grow dim. And the question we want to analyze today or discuss today, why did Isaac's eyes grow dim? This is what the Torah says. In Genesis 27a, verse Aleph, Vahi ki zaken Yitzchak, vatichena einav mirot, vayikra et Esav beno hagadol, vayomer elav beni, vayomer hineni. This is how the chapter starts in Sefer Bereshit. English, who wants to do the English? I'm going to need a lot of English today. We have a lot of English passages, so if anybody wants to volunteer and read the English, it's great. You'll do it better. You pronounce the words better than me. When Isaac, who wants to do the first one?
I will. When
Yes.
Isaac, can you hear me? Okay. When Isaac was old and his eyes were too dim to see, he called his older son Esau and said to him, "My son." He answered, "Here I am."
Okay, so this is how the chapter starts. And the question I want to ask you, a very simple question. What do you think, according to the plain sense, the simple meaning of the text, why did Isaac's eyes grow dim? Why did Isaac's eyes grow dim? Plain sense, shot.
According to the text, because he grew old.
Right. The plain meaning, the simple meaning of the text is because he was old. And there's nothing that needs to be said about that. It's obvious. And one does not actually need to explore and to find reasons why that happens. Indeed, in ancient Jewish literature, such as Apocrypha, Jewish Hellenistic literature, people would often repeat the sentence the way it's expressed in the Torah with no further elaboration, because there's nothing that needs to be said about that. It's very obvious. In the book of Jubilees, and in the 7th year on this week, Isaac called Esau his eldest son, and he said to him, "My son, I am old, and behold, my eyes are dim so that I can hardly see." Very simple, no further explanations. In Josephus also, just in one sentence, in his old age, Isaac's eyes became completely dim. That's it. I didn't include it in the presentation. If you open Ramban, Nachmanides' interpretation to the Torah, he says in very clear words, Al derech hapshat, if you follow plain sense, it was just a matter of age. And he says if somebody argues with that, he's just blind. That's what Ramban says in his interpretation. So plain sense is very, very simple. If that is true, and this is going to be our starting point for our discussion, why is it then that the rabbis in the Midrash discuss the different possible reasons for Isaac's blindness? And as we will soon see, the rabbis offer not just one, numerous explanations for Isaac's becoming blind in his old age. What was bothering them? Why did they need to explore? Why did they need to find the cause of his losing his sight? What was missing? The Torah specifies it's very clear. He was old. It's a question. Why were the rabbis concerned with that? Any ideas? What's troubling the rabbis? Yes. Why did the rabbis trouble themselves explaining the causes of his being blind? Okay, so what I want to present and suggest, and this is what we're going to do in the course of the remaining part of our session, I think the rabbis are troubled by the very basic fact that good people are not supposed to suffer. Righteous people, such as Yitzchak, are not supposed to go through the pain of being blind in their old years. And if something goes wrong, it needs some explanation. The rabbis were not just accepting the very basic fact that he's getting old. They want to look for some reason that will justify the fact that he became blind. Perhaps they're using that as an opportunity to express all sorts of ideas that they have in mind, but it's also an attempt to resolve ethical question, theological, ethical question. Why is Isaac suffering? Why did he deserve to go through this in his old years, old days of his life?
Or perhaps it never said that Abraham got.
Abraham, right? Abraham didn't lose his sight. So why, of all people, is Isaac going through this hell of not being able to see when he's old? And the rabbis will explore and provide us with different ways of analyzing this text and this mystery. What we will do today, we will approach a text that is found in the book of Genesis Rabbah, Bereshit Rabbah. I think it's chapter 64. And we will analyze several passages of the Midrash. And with regards to each one of those passages, I will ask you the following questions. And I will be very happy if you're active participants. If not, I will have to do the work, but I'm very happy for you to help me out. So the questions that we're going to ask with regards to each one of those explanations that the rabbi offer. First question is the essence of the response. What are they saying essentially? Why did he lose his sight? Just the basic response. Two, what message, what theological or ethical message are they trying to bring in this interpretation, in each one of those interpretations? How are they resolving the big question we had? Why are good people such as Yitzchak suffering? What does that reveal about their approach to Yisurim, for suffering in general? And finally, the text. Each of those explanations is also rooted in the text. And when we talk about the text, we have to look in the local parashah, in the local context, but also in the larger view, or explore the larger story, distant possible verses that are influencing the rabbis. Whenever the rabbis will point out or allude to another verse, we'll try to make the effort to open that text and see what the rabbis were looking for when turning to that particular verse. In my presentation, I think the rabbis give in this midrash close to 10 different types of explanations. I'm afraid we're not going to be able to go through all of them, but at least we'll see some of them, and you can do the rest of the work on your own. If I'll see, based on the time, we'll see how much we can cover, and maybe I'll skip some to keep the better ones for our discussion. So the first one, let's start with the first one. The first one in Midrash. I'm reading the Hebrew, and you can look at the English simultaneously, or, and one of you maybe will read it also in English, just so we are sure we're following what's going on. In Hebrew, Rabbi Chanina bar Papa patach. This rabbi opens. Rabot asita ata Hashem Elohai, niflaotecha umachshevotecha eleinu. Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, kol peulot shepa'alta eleinu, bishvilenu. Lama kahu einei Yitzchak? Kedei sheyavo Yaakov v'yitol et habrachot. Vahi ki zaken Yitzchak. English, who's doing the English? Quickly. Rabbi Chanina bar Papa began.
Rabbi Hanina bar Papa began, "You, O Lord, my God, have done many things, the wonders you have devised for us." Rabbi Hanina said, "All the actions and thoughts that you performed on our behalf were for our benefit. Why did Isaac's eyes dim? It was so Jacob could come and take the blessings. It was when Isaac was old."
Okay, so we're going step by step, and I want you to get to see the pattern. So the first question I always will ask you is the essence of the response. So according to this explanation, why did Isaac lose his vision?
So that Yaakov would get the bracha.
Right, in order
so that Yitzchak wouldn't see.
Right. Yeah, he lost his sight, so he can't see. And so from this perspective, I would say the essence is Isaac's blindness was intended to allow Jacob to receive the blessings. And therefore, it should not be viewed solely as misfortunate that befell Yitzchak. It was something necessary in order to enable Yaakov to take the blessings from his father rather than Esau. So this is on a very basic level. But if we're trying to think about it in a larger perspective and examine the idea, the theological or ethical idea the rabbis are trying to tell us, what are essentially the rabbis are telling us? And that's why they started with the verse in Tehillim, the verse that they brought at the beginning. When they brought the text here, I'm going to go back for a second so you remember. When they brought this text in Psalms 446, you, O Lord, my God, have done many things, the wonders you have devised for us. So what is he trying to say by that verse? And what's the larger idea that they're trying to bring forth?
That it's all part of a greater,
explaining the particular story of Isaac, what are they trying to say?
It's all part of a greater plan.
It's a part of a greater plan. Why do people suffer then?
That Hashem
what are they trying to say?
That
so I would formulate it along.
Suffering has a meaning. That
suffering has a meaning. I would add one more thing. And sometimes we, as little people,
don't see the whole picture.
We don't see the big picture. Right, exactly. I wrote it as follows. A person is not aware of the full picture. What appears to be bad or negative in one's very narrow perspective, in truth might be good, might be for their own good. So if we would ask Isaac, are you happy that you lost your sight? Probably he would say no. But from a larger perspective, we know that this is what was meant to happen. And even he would acknowledge or appreciate that, thinking about the large picture. So this is the larger philosophical idea. Where did they get that from in the verses? This is a very interesting philosophical conception, but where is it rooted in the verses? Where did they get the idea that he lost his vision so that Yaakov, so that his son, could take the blessings? So here we have to think in two ways. First, look in the local text, in the local verses, local context, but also examine the larger picture. So the local context, if you recall, the story or the reference to Isaac's blindness appears right before the story of the blessings. What the rabbis are doing, they're trying to link between these two stories. This is what I wrote here in the presentation. Isaac's blindness is mentioned prior to the episode of the blessings being taken, thus creating a link between these two events. However, always ask, is this the pshat or this is a creative way of reading? And I think the rabbis are doing something very creative. They're changing the cause and effect in the story. Because according to the plain sense, Isaac's blindness, being blind, is what enabled Jacob to steal the brachot, to take the blessings away from him. What the rabbis are saying is no, it's not that because Isaac was blind, that Jacob was able to take the blessings. As a matter of fact, he became blind so that Jacob will take the brachot. This is the intention for him being blind. It's not just what allowed the story to develop. It was not just the potential that Jacob saw because his father is not seeing. No, that's the reason why this took place. So the rabbis are adding a new dimension, the way they try to link between these two events. It's not the blindness that enabled stealing the blessings, but it was the reason why Isaac became blind from the very start. The rabbis also quoted texts from Tehillim. You remember we saw 46. We're not going to be lazy now, and you don't have to open your books because I put it in the presentation. We immediately check the text itself to see why did the rabbis choose that verse? What do we find there? So this is what you would find in the larger context. So these are the verses, the relevant verses in Tehillim. Rabot asita ata Hashem Elohai, niflaotecha umachshevotecha eleinu. That was the part that the rabbis quoted in the Midrash. Oh my Lord, my God, you have done many things. The wonders you have devised for us cannot be set out before you. I would rehearse the tale of them. However, look what the rabbis say, what the text says in Hebrew. In Hebrew, it reads, "En aroch elecha agida va'adabera atzmo misaper." The stories are, if I translate it literally, atzmo misaper. I put it in bold letters. There are more than can be told. Also, later on, you have the same verb. However, the word atzmu in Hebrew has another meaning. How do you say when you want to close your eyes in Hebrew?
Latzom einayim.
Latzom einayim. And I think this is what the rabbis are playing with. You did so much for us. However, atzmu misaper. Our eyes are shut.
Closed.
We are not able to appreciate what you're doing for us. Our vision is limited. Our perspective is limited. Our eyes are atzmu from appreciating what happened to us. So this is a double meaning of the word atzmu that they're playing with. In the following verse, they even combine these two words one after the other. V'lo yacholti lirot, I couldn't see, atzmu misa'arot roshi. So you even see the idea of not being able to see right before the word atzmu. So la'atzom has the meaning of something ginormous, too much that can be said, but it also bears this second meaning of closing one's eyes. So what the verse is essentially saying, our eyes are closed, or more in a metaphor way, we don't appreciate, we don't know the full story. We have a very, very narrow way of viewing or understanding, experiencing what goes on around us. And what might appear bad could be actually something more positive. This is the one example. We're going on, we'll see at least a few more. Next explanation. The next one reads as follows. Here, I'll have the English immediately. Rabbi Yitzchak Patach. Rabbi Yitzchak, it's not the same Yitzchak of the Torah, it's a rabbi, but very often the name of the rabbi in many midrashim has something to say about the same name in the Bible. Rabbi Yitzchak Patach, Veshochad lo tikach. Rabbi Isaac began, you shall not take a bribe. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Ma imi shenatal shochad mimi shaya chayav lo kahu einav, halokech mimi sheino chayav lo alachat kama vechama. I need an English reader who wants to do the English.
Rabbi Yitzhak began, you shall not take a bribe, for bribes blind the clear-sighted. Rabbi Yitzhak said, if one who took a bribe from one who owed him, his eyes dimmed, one who takes a bribe from one who does not owe him, all the more so.
Okay, so now we're doing it again, step by step. First, we want to explore or explain the essence of the response. So from the rabbi's perspective, why, according to this explanation, why did Isaac lose his vision?
So
this is a very different type of explanation. What are they saying? What has he done that caused him to lose his sight?
he's done something unethical.
Right. According to this explanation, Isaac did something wrong. He was taking bribe from his son, alluding to Esau giving him food, and therefore he lost his vision. That's what the rabbis are essentially saying here. So the essence of the response, Isaac's blindness came upon him as a punishment for having accepted a bribe. That's in a plain sense. Now let's try to think a little bit more broad and also explore the textual basis for this reading. So what's the message here? In the first explanation, we said if somebody suffers what he might experience as bad, perhaps is good for him. It's not as negative as he experiences it. Here, the rabbis are adopting a different perspective. And what are they saying? If you suffer, it means that what?
You deserve it.
You deserve it. You did something wrong. And even if you don't know it, find hard. If you looked hard enough, you'll find something wrong that you have done. And in the case of Isaac, it's preferring Esau over Jacob based on the fact that he was giving him all this bribes, meaning providing him with food and so on. Where did they get this idea from? So again, on a local basis, they're probably here. So you have the message here. A person's suffering is not random, and one must search for the sin that brought about the punishment. In a local context, the rabbis are probably thinking about a text or a verse that appeared a chapter before, when the Torah talks about Jacob and Esau growing up. The Torah says, "Vayigdalu haneharim, vayi Esav ish yodea tzayid ish sadeh, v'Yaakov ishtam yoshev ohalim. Vayehav Yitzchak et Esav ki tzayid befiv, v'Rivka ohevet et Yaakov." English. When the boy grew up,
Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the outdoors, but Jacob became a mild man, raising livestock. Isaac favored Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah favored Jacob.
From the rabbi's perspective, this is not saying something positive about Esau. It's actually saying something negative about him. The more natural thing would be to prefer to favor Jacob. That's why Rebekah, Rivka, favors him for no reason. If nevertheless Isaac prefers Esau, it's because he has done something. He gave him something. He bribed him. And this is the way the rabbis understand this text. In this particular example, it is clear, though, that what inspires the rabbis to think along these lines and attribute Isaac's blinding to this particular sin is not something that is mentioned here, but rather elsewhere with regards to shochad, giving bribes. In Exodus 23, verse 8, the Torah says in very clear words, "Veshochad lo tikach," do not take bribes, "ki hashochad ye'aver pikchim v'yisalef divrei tzadikim. For bribes blind the clear-sighted and upset the pleas of those who are in the right. Is this the plain sense of the text, what the rabbis are doing? What did the Torah mean when the Torah said that if you take a bribe, it will blind clear-sighted? What did the Torah mean by that? Does it mean that
You
a
won't-
person who's a judge who takes bribes immediately need to visit this optometrist and examine his eyes?
You won't see clearly. You won't judge clearly. You'll
Right.
be
It's a
influenced.
metaphor. It's a metaphor for how you experience reality, how you view, how you judge what's in front of you. But the rabbis took this in a literal manner. So you see, it's a drash, it's a creative way, taking a metaphor and interpreting it as something very literal. The rabbis say if you take shochad, if you take bribe from somebody, you will actually lose your sight. Your glasses, the number in your glasses, the prescription will get a higher number. In the Mishnah in Masechet Pe'ah, it says, Kol dayan shelokeach shochad, any judge who accepts a bribe, eino met min hazikna ad she'einav kehot. He will not die in old age before his eyes have become dim. As it is said, and you shall not accept a bribe. So here too, they explain the same way. I think that the fact that they refer to a person being blind by saying einav kehot is alluding to the story of Isaac, because that's the expression that is mentioned also in the story of Isaac.
Can
So
I
here
ask
too,
something?
yes.
I find this very difficult to swallow.
Yeah.
Why are we suddenly assuming, or the rabbis are assuming, because they're not getting it from the text, that Esau has no feeling for his father, and maybe it's not a bribe, because a bribe is a very specific thing, but they need to make Esau the bad guy and they need to make Jacob the good guy?
That's a very, very good question. I will not be able to answer that. It's a big question. The only thing I was trying to allude to, or as I was reading the verses by Esau and Jacob, that the Torah says very simply that Rebecca favors Jacob without explaining why. And I think what the Torah is trying to say, there's no reason to explain that. That's the obvious. And if Isaac is preferring Esau, it's because something that he's fooling him, because he's doing something to change that simple mindset that one was supposed to accept. But you're asking a very big question. Too hard for me to solve now.
Wait, and the other thing is, the suffering. The only thing that Isaac is actually saying is that he's old. He's not verbalizing, it's terrible, I'm losing my sight. He seems
You're right.
to be, so it's like, again, it's because it serves your purpose to, put the narrative that they want in
I think the rabbis are, in a sense, I think they are troubled by this problem, but they're also experiencing this as an opportunity. Let's try to explore this story. And in this case, we see that what the rabbis are doing, and this is something we'll see later on as well, the rabbis are already thinking about losing one's vision throughout the Bible. And they're going to examine all those cases in the Bible and in other places and try to read according to that, understanding what could be the causes for Isaac losing his vision in our particular story. We have so much more to do, so I'm rushing.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
No, it's good that
throw
you
in
asked. That's the way we learn.
They're
So here
also.
we're doing a third explanation. This explanation is a little bit more familiar because it appears in Rashi, but it appears, this explanation actually appears in two distinct manners that they seem that they're similar, but they're actually very, very different. What do the rabbis say now? Davar acher, another explanation. Mir'ot, vatichena einav mir'ot. It says by Isaac, mikoach ota re'iyah. בשעה שעקד אברהם אבינו את יצחק, בכו מלאכי השרת, שנאמר, הן אראלם צעקו חוצה מלאכי שלום, מר יבקיון, ונשלו דמעות מעיניהם לעיניו, והיו רשומות בתוך עיניו. וכיוון שהזקין כהו עיניו, שנאמר, ויהי כי זקן יצחק, ותיכנה עיניו נראות. Longer passage. Who's doing the English?
Okay, another explanation from seeing. As a result of that sight, when Abraham, our patriarch, bound his son atop the altar, the ministering angels wept. That is what is written. Behold, their angels cry out outside. Tears fell from their eyes into his eyes, and they had an effect inside his eyes. When he grew old, his eyes dimmed. That is what is written. It was when Isaac was old.
That his eyes grew dim, etc. Right? So again, we're doing it step by step. Essence of the response, of the explanation. So what are they saying? Why did he lose his vision? On a very technical level, what made him lose his vision? What made him lose his sight?
He accepted Esau's gifts of food and other
Now
things.
they're not mentioning. This is a separate explanation. They didn't mention in any way the food that Esau is providing with Esau. What are they saying?
Because of the Akedah.
Because of the Akedah, more specifically,
The
you're
tears,
right.
the dma'ot shel malachim.
Right, the tears somehow, once falling into his eyes, caused some damage his vision. That's what the rabbis are saying.
But that's a very hard answer.
Okay, so we'll explore this explanation in a second. And on the first level, so this is a very technical description. Isaac's blindness was caused by the tears of the angels at the time of the binding of the Akedah. In this case, we need to ask ourselves, what are they trying to teach us on a theological, ethical level? And also, where could this be rooted in the text?
Just to bring up a comment from chat from Ellen, the angel's tears are connected to Isaac's blindness, a very delayed reaction.
Okay, very delayed reaction, right? It didn't happen immediately, you're right. But first on a theological, ethical level, so what are they trying to say? And I think this is, again, a whole new way of viewing suffering in the world. If the first explanation was telling people, when you suffer, it's not really suffering. What you perceive as bad might be good. That's one way of looking at it. The second explanation was saying, if you're suffering, you must have done something wrong. And this guy, this sage, is saying, sometimes suffering has nothing to do with doing wrong. Sometimes suffering can be the result of something good. Love also involves a lot of suffering. When God is expressing, when the angels are expressing their concern, their love for Isaac, that too can cause some suffering. Love and suffering sometimes go together. It's not one or the other. Obviously, more needs to be said about that.
Along those lines, it's not just love and suffering, but even when you do right, even in the Akedah, which was, a tremendous positive on the part of Yitzchak. Even as a result of that, something negative is occurring to him.
Isaac must have visited his therapist for many, many years afterwards, even though he's done the right thing.
Yes. And it's the angels who are crying. I mean, there's so many different convoluted levels there. And do angels have tears? I mean, there's
I like the way you're describing it. Right. He did the right thing, but there's still some outcomes to that right decision.
Right.
Where did they get this from? So here too, the rabbis are alluding to the local text, but also thinking about the general, the more distant verses that are out there. So on a local level, and the rabbis specify that, they talk about the word mir'ot. Vayhi ki zaken Yitzchak, vatichena einav mir'ot. In the local context, this is what the text says, vatichena einav mir'ot. On a simple sense, according to the Pshat, what the Torah is saying, when he grew old, he lost his vision, and from now on, he won't be able to see. Mir'ot is talking about the future. His eyes grew dim, and he was no longer able to see. But the rabbis say, no. Mir'ot is not speaking about the future. It's actually alluding to something that he saw in the past. Right? In plain translation, his eyes grew dim so that he could not see in the future. But the rabbis say, no, Mir'ot is the cause, something that happened in the past. His eyes grew dim as a result of what he had seen in the past. Mir'ot mikoach otariya, because of what he's seen, because of what he experienced in the Akedah. And it's true, it took many years until it affected his vision, but it's referring to something in the past rather than thinking about something in the future. But the rabbis also quoted a text from Isaiah. And I think that explains also something interesting in their drasha. What did the rabbis say in the midrash? I'm going back to the text. The rabbis use a very interesting formulation for describing is losing the fact that Isaac lost his vision. It talks about their tears dropping from their eyes into his eyes. And in the Hebrew, and it's not really translated precisely in English, it says, Vehayu reshumot betoch einav. As if the rabbis are saying, the tears were inscribed, written, or they left a mark in his eyes, those tears. Where did they get that from? Here, I think they're begging us to look into the verse in Isaiah. In the verse in Isaiah, here you see the full verse, and we're not going to explore why did the rabbis think this verse has to do with the Akedah, but the verse in Isaiah, here, we're going to the distant context. So the verse in Isaiah is referring to angels who are crying, and erelan tzaku chutza malachei shalom mariv kayum. The Aralites cry aloud, Shalom's messengers weep bitterly. That's the English translation of that text. For some reason or another, the rabbis thought that these angels that were addressed, that the verses in Isaiah is alluding to, are those angels who appear in the story of the Akedah, and that they're crying. But the interesting thing, and that will also explain us, why did they talk about the tears leaving a mark, reshumot, inscribed in his eyes? Why did they choose that expression? And I think what they were looking in that verse is the way that the tears are called or referred to. In the verse in Isaiah, the word that is used for tears is the word mar, mariv kayum. Mar could be bitter, but it could also be a way we refer to the tears. Thinking about that, I think we understand what the rabbis were trying to say. If you recall, what does the verse say by Yitzchak? Vayiki zaken Yitzchak, vatichena einav mirot. Mirot could be broken into mar and ot, meaning the tears were written. They're ot, they're like a letter. They left a mark in his eyes. Vatichena einav mar, the tears left ot, a mark in his ears, in his eyes. And I think this is precisely what the rabbis are saying here. And that's why they use this beautiful expression, it's as if they left a mark, those tears in his eyes. It's such a beautiful way, poetic way of saying it. And if you don't look carefully, you might miss on that hint or poetic language of the rabbis. So it's both the local way of looking at the text, mirot, and not mirot, but it's also marot. The mar of the angels, the tears of the angels, leave ot in his eyes. We're moving on to another explanation, and our time is already getting shorter and shorter, and I don't know how we're going to deal with that. We need to see at least two more explanations. The next one seems a little bit similar at the beginning, but it's really not the same. We'll read it immediately in the English version. Okay, who wants to do the English? It's a full page.
All right. Another explanation from seeing. As a result of that sight, when Abraham, our patriarch, bound his son atop the altar, he, Isaac, directed his eyes heavenward and looked at the divine presence. They say a parable. To what is the matter comparable? It is comparable to a king who was strolling at the entrance of his palace and glanced and saw his friend's son peering at him through the window. He said, "If I kill him, I will now cause my friend to collapse. Instead, I will decree that his windows should be sealed." So when Abraham, our patriarch, bound his son atop the altar, he directed his eyes and looked at the divine presence.
Meaning Isaac.
Yeah.
Right. He meaning Isaac.
Okay, thank you. The Holy One, blessed be he, said, "If I kill him, I will now cause Abraham, my friend, to collapse. Instead, I decree that his eyes will dim." When he grew old, his eyes dimmed. It was when Isaac was old.
Okay, so here too, the rabbis connect between the story of the Akedah, of the binding of Isaac, to the fact that he lost his vision. On a first basic level, we want to explore the essence of the response. So why did he lose his vision? Here too, that's associated with the Akedah, but it's a different type of explanation. It's not the tears, the love of God that causes him to lose his vision, but rather, what is it here?
It was a commutation
Emotional
of sense.
discomfort.
What did he do? Here, I
He-
think what the text is
instead of
saying, if you think about the parable, yes,
I was going to say, instead of him being killed, he had a lesser effect.
but why was he
lives, but
supposed to
he
suffer
wants
to begin with? Why was he supposed to be killed? Think about the parable. Just like the little kid who is looking
He
at the
looked
king
where he
when he's
shouldn't look.
walking in his palace,
He,
in his
he
pajamas.
looked where he shouldn't. He shouldn't have
He
looked
looked
up.
where he shouldn't. He's lying on his back during the Akedah, looking up in heaven and seeing all those magnificent sights that he's not supposed to look or observe or see. And for that reason, he's being punished. So here, it also associates the blindness with the Akedah, but in a different manner. Here, Isaac's blindness came as a result of the fact that he gazed upon the divine presence during the binding story. From a moral perspective, this is a very different type of association. It goes back to the sin and punishment approach. He must have done something wrong, but rather than attributing it to the fact that he was accepting bribe from Esau, here it's presenting a sin that only is related to Isaac himself. He was looking at God when he was not supposed to. Right? So here it's a different type of explanation. Suffering and affliction are connected to the sin committed, and this is according to the status of the sinner. So the bigger you are, you're more sensible for punishments. Where did the rabbis get this from? On a local level, we already know. They say the word mirot is not referring to the future, but it's referring to the past. It's not explaining what will happen, but it's explaining the cause of why things happened in the past. So this is in the local level, right? I'm sorry, the local level, yes, the local level, as I said, is the same person. But I think we still need to explain one more thing. The rabbis didn't just say he lost his vision because of what he's seen. They're coming and saying, as a matter of fact, he was supposed to have been killed. And God was actually nice to him by only taking away from him his vision. Where did they get that from? Why did they say that? Where did they get the idea that he was supposed to have been killed? I think what the rabbis are doing here, without saying a
Because
word,
maybe because it says Vatechena and Einav Me'ot, because it specifically points out that it's his vision that's affected, as opposed to anything else in his body.
okay, but it's still
So
not
it's
explicit.
also
I think they're
it's in
thinking
the
about something. Yes.
it's in the merit of Abraham. In the parable,
Okay,
it's,
but still,
you know, the
you're right.
king doesn't want to
But
hurt
why
his
did they
friend.
want? You're right that he's spared from death because of his father. But why was he supposed to be killed to begin with? I think what
At
the
the
rabbis are not
Akedah.
telling us. Yes,
At the Akedah, he was saved also, and he was supposed to be killed.
I hear, but I want you to hear my explanation. This is not my explanation. I think this is what the rabbis have in mind. I think what the rabbis are doing here, they're thinking again in a very large context. And they're thinking about another person in the Bible without even mentioning his name. And that's the story of Moshe. And what did they found so interesting by Moshe? In the case of Moshe, we know that he expresses his desire, his wish to see God. And God tells him,
Oh, you can't see
"Vayomer,
me and
lo
live.
tuchal lirot et panai ki lo yirani adam v'chai." He said, you cannot see my face, for no human can see me and live. So this is what God has told Moshe. Moshe indeed does not view God, right? We know he didn't see God at that instant. He only saw God from the back and not from the front. But we also remember another scene in Moshe's life.
Matan Torah. The
Before
people
Matan
say
Torah,
that.
at the beginning of his story, the first time we encounter the story of Moshe, we see that Moshe is very careful, looking at places that he's not supposed to. If you remember the story of the burning bush, that's why I included this illustration on the top. He wants to come and approach what he's seeing, and God tells him, don't get any closer. And the Torah specifies it, Vayaster Moshe panav, ki yareh mehabit el Elohim. Moshe stopped himself from viewing or from looking at places that he was not supposed to look at. But I think, and this is the punchline, this is where the rabbis got the idea from. When Moshe is about to die, the Torah talks about him, and the Torah says or describes him in two ways. They say two things about Moshe. Moshe ben 120 shana bemoto. Moshe was 120 years old when he died, and lo kahata ino velo nas lecho. His eyes were undimmed. He never lost his vision. And I think what the rabbis are doing is exactly thinking about this first. What are they saying? If a person who hasn't seen God, Moshe, who is praised for not viewing God, for covering his face when getting anywhere close, when he's following the prohibition of looking at God, obeying to what God tells him, we know two things of him. He died at a very old age, meaning he didn't lose a minute of his life. But the Torah also says that his eyes, his vision was kept. So I think what the rabbis are doing, so let's think about Isaac then. If Isaac sinned and looked at God, we probably can assume that he deserved both of these punishments. He should have been killed earlier, in contrast to Moshe, who is living 120 years old, and he also should have lost his sight because he's looking at God. Moshe was supposed to have been killed. A person is not able to see God and live. Why did he not die? As you were saying, because God loves Abraham and he spared him from being killed. Nevertheless, the fitting thing would be at least to take away his vision. So the rabbis here, without even referring to the story, I think this is what they have in mind. They're thinking about the story of Isaac as a story that is standing in contrast with the story of Moshe. And Moshe and Isaac are two extremes. The one person who stops himself from viewing God will live forever, not forever, until his full life with a beautiful vision. And if somebody sinned and did view God, that must be the cause of him losing his sight. We're going to have one more.
Did it say expressly in the Torah that Isaac saw God?
It does not say that. Right.
Okay.
It does not say, but I think they're basically saying, what could be the possible causes for one losing vision? And they see Moshe didn't lose his vision because he didn't look at things that he's not supposed to. So let's think reverse. If Isaac did lose his sight, he must have seen something that he was not supposed to see. We're going to do one more. And with that, we're going to have to stop. And there's so much more to talk about. This endless. I included 5 more explanations in the presentation, but we just have to finish. So we'll see one more thing. And with that, we'll have on this sad, tragic way, we'll have to end our session. The last one appears in the Midrash and presents a whole new way of thinking about it from a theological perspective. We'll read it briefly and we'll take 5 more minutes. Who wants to read? Long, but simple. Rabbi Judah Bar Simon said,
Abraham demanded aging. He said before him, Master of the universe, a man and his son enter a place, and no one knows which of them to honor. Because you adorn him with aging, a person knows whom to honor. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, as you live, you have demanded a good thing, and it will begin with you. From the beginning of the book until that point, aging is not written. When Abraham stood, he granted him aging. Abraham was old.
Meaning Abraham was saying, we need to have aging in this world. Otherwise, how will people know who to honor? If 2 people walk into the bus, who would be the one who's supposed to sit and who's going to remain standing? We need to have some external appearance of aging. And God says, great idea. I don't know if God was cynical or serious, but he says, great idea, but it's going to be you. And that's why Abraham is the first person who's mentioned in the context of being old.
Isaac demanded suffering. He said before him, Master of the universe, a person dies without suffering. The attribute of justice is outstretched against him. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, as you live, you have demanded a good thing, and I will begin with you. From the beginning of the book until he's here, suffering is not written. When Isaac stood, he granted him suffering. It was when Isaac was old and his eyes dimmed.
So here too, Isaac comes up with this brilliant idea that suffering is necessary. If our life will be perfect, if everything will go great, what excuses are we going to have when we go up there? But if we have so much suffering along the way, so when we make it up there and God tells us, you're not perfect, we could tell him, you know what? We didn't have such a perfect time down here as well. So you can be a little bit forgiving. That's what Isaac is suggesting. And God tells him, great idea, but you're going to be the first one to suffer by losing his sight. Finally, Jacob demanded illness.
He said before him, Master of the universe, a person dies without illness and does not settle matters before his children. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, as you live, you have demanded a good thing, and it will begin with you. One said to Joseph, behold, your father is ill.
Okay, so we're going through this very, very fast. According to this explanation here, the essence of the answer again is Isaac's blindness came as response to his own request for suffering. According to this explanation, we don't need to ask why did he suffer, why did he deserve suffering, because from this guy's perspective, suffering has a positive role in the contemporary world, and also suffering was something that Isaac wanted. So it was not even something that he didn't understand or realize. It was something that he begged for, and he got exactly what he wanted. This is an ethical idea, but I think that's what's fascinating is here to look into such a sensitive way of reading verses. What the rabbis are looking for is not just the local parashah, the local verse, but they're trying to see this in the large context. What they're doing is they're not just trying to find places where zikna, aging appears, suffering appears. They want to see how we're talking about a gradual development in the world. And with that, we're going to end our class. Look at the verses that they have in mind. By Yitzchak, by Abraham, it says, Ve'avraham zaken. So Abraham is the one who initiated or came up with a brilliant idea of aging. Yitzchak is not just going to suffer. He also inherits from his father the idea of being old. And that's why we see by Isaac, Vayiki zaken Yitzchak, vatichena einav mirot. He's also receiving this present of his father being old. But in addition to that, he added the concept of suffering into the world. Finally, with Jacob, we see all those three joined together. By Jacob, we don't just see him being sick. Look what the Torah says by Jacob. Vayomer Yosef hine avicha chole, ve'enei Yisrael kavdu mizoken lo yuchal lirot. Sometime afterwards, Joseph was told, your father is ill. He brings Menashe and Ephraim to his father, and the Torah says, now Israel's eyes were dim with age, he could not see. So you see, this is a gradual process. Each generation adds on. Avraham is just old. Yitzchak, vayiki zaken Yitzchak, vatichen enav mirot. And Jacob is already adding. So I think what the rabbis were saying, they were not just looking for the first appearance of each idea. They were also very sensitive to this gradual development in the world. Each generation comes up or creates or brings this new idea into the world. And from that point on, it will follow with us. We're going to be done now. And I wanted, what we were trying to do today is constantly to think about these two dimensions in Midrash. On the one hand, try to think about the ideas, and at the same time, always look into the verses, because the rabbis are thinking in these two lines at the same time, both at the local text and also in distance verses. And this is part of the beauty of Chazal, so creative and so deep at the same time.
All right.
Done. I wish
you.
I could have
Thank
done
you.
more. Unfortunately,
Dr.
we're almost halfway only.
Well,
This has
don't
been-
say there's not more. Well, this is the last session for the Falzman. This class will pick up in the spring. Please keep an eye on our website later in the future. and to find out when the exact dates and times, but we will have more of this late January, early February.
Great.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.